My name is Nabonidus, and I am an astrologer in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. Today the king demanded the impossible from all the learned men at court. He told us that he had had a troubling dream. Actually, I've heard it's been more than one, and that he wanted us to interpret it. This would not have been a big issue. We have many books which give us the interpretation of various dreams, and we are skilled and practiced at using them. But the king was also demanding that we tell him what he had actually dreamt. We have had years of experience, but we can't do the impossible, get inside his mind. I don't think I'd want to in any case. We said to him, what the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men. The king then flew into a rage and swore that he would have all us wise men executed if we failed in this task. I was quaking in my boots, I can tell you. I thought I was a goner. But then Daniel, one of the Hebrew boys, asked the king for some more time to interpret the dream. He's a bit of a strange one, that Daniel. I've heard he even turned down some of the court's best food. Something to do with his God, I think. Well, you'll never guess what's happening now. He says he's going to give the king all the details of his dream and its meaning. How can he? How can he do what only the gods can? It just doesn't make any sense. Today we're continuing to look at the story of Daniel. Daniel is a young Hebrew man who is living under Babylonian rule, under the tyrannical king Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel and his Hebrew friends, Mishael and Azariah, have already found a way to live distinctively as Israelites, whilst at the same time serving the king at court. In our section today, chapter 2, the king is demanding that the trained members of his court tell him what he dreamt and then interpret it. Three interesting aspects of this situation grab my attention. Firstly, the king is demanding that the courtiers do the impossible. Secondly, the astrologers, one of whom I imagined the thoughts of just now, says that only the gods could do what the king is saying they must. And thirdly, Daniel states in his prayer that his God reveals deep and hidden things. First of all, the impossible. There are many examples throughout the Old and New Testaments when it is said that nothing is impossible for God. Jeremiah prays to the Lord, nothing is too hard for you. And God confirms, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? And speaks of how he will restore the Israelite people after their land has been destroyed by the Babylonians. Jesus meets with a rich young ruler who is not prepared to give up his wealth to follow Jesus. Putting something else before God is such a problem that Jesus compares it to being as hard as a camel going through the eye of a needle. Yet, he tells his disciples, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. The second point is that the pagan astrologers in Nebuchadnezzar's court recognize that the gods can reveal what human beings can't. It takes an immortal, all-powerful being to do some things. They are helpless in the face of what the king is demanding of them. They are helpless because they are mere human beings, but even more so because they do not have a close relationship with their gods, who they say do not live among men. These gods are distant and uninterested in human affairs. The astrologers recognize that they need divine help, but that help is not forthcoming. By contrast, Daniel knows immediately who he can ask for help, and he seems at least fairly confident that he will get the help he needs to save his life and the lives of his friends. He has a close relationship with God, so is able to, along with Mishael and Azariah, plead for mercy from the God of heaven. They can bring their needs before God. Unlike the pagan gods who do not live among men, Daniel's God is so close that he will ultimately, in Jesus, take on human flesh. The third point of interest is that Daniel knows that God can reveal mysteries, aspects of life that are normally hidden from humanity's view. Note how he cries out to God in crisis, but doesn't forget to praise him after his prayer is answered. For Daniel, God is a God of light, bringing light, bringing light to what is hidden in darkness. Daniel says about God, he reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. John tells us that Jesus will bring light in the darkness. He is the Logos, wisdom. Similarly, with Daniel, God is about light and is sharing something of his divine knowledge with his people. So these are the three things that interest me in this passage in the first part of chapter 2 of Daniel. The fact that the impossible is demanded by the king and only God can do the impossible. Secondly, that those that believe in many gods in Nebuchadnezzar's court feel that their gods are not with them. But by contrast, Daniel feels that his God is close and that he can ask him, even if it seems impossible for this situation to be sorted out. And Daniel talks about God bringing light and wisdom. So what do these passages tell us for living as Christians today? In this passage, the king asks the impossible, and God does the impossible. He can still do the impossible in our own time, and we should remember that. Seemingly impossible situations can be transformed by God, although this does not always happen in the way we might like. In Daniel 2, people who believe in many gods rather than one are at a loss as to who can come to their rescue because they know their gods will not. There are many people today who either believe in a number of gods, a seemingly different God to ours, or no God at all. They cry out when they are in distress, as we all do, but who can they cry out to? Nevertheless, even people who do not have a Christian faith may have a sense that there's something out there, something beyond themselves. Maybe our role could be to gently share the comfort we get from a close relationship with our God of the impossible, and we may also offer to pray for them. So in this story, we see how Daniel trusts in his God, who is full of light and full of knowledge. This is our God too. He knows everything that is going on in our lives and in the lives of those around us, even if we don't. He can bring light to every situation. He can bring light to every situation.